And I know there's a lot, it's gonna be a little bit tight in here. Okay, is that everybody? You ready, Candace?
Just 1 second.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to take a quick minute and introduce Acting FEMA Administrator Pete Gaynor. Great to have him in Georgia. We appreciate the federal response that we've gotten from FEMA and from the President and the rest of the administration. Quite honestly, it's been stellar, and I'll speak a little bit more to that after the Administrator gives you a quick update. Pete?
Thank you, sir.
Welcome to Georgia.
Thank you very much. It's a warm welcome. Thanks to the governor's team for the great work to get Georgia ready for whatever Hurricane Dorian brings. I know it's been a slow mover. I think at FEMA we're counting day 12 and still have some days in front of us. This response, not only in Georgia but across Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, and probably into Virginia, is a whole of government response. Storms like this are locally executed, state managed, and federally supported. And the most important part is with individuals that are prepared. If all that is working, it really turns into a great response. Dorian moves closer, dangerously close to the Georgia coast through the night, and it's important to stay vigilant and heed the warnings of your local officials. There are tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches posted right now. And just to give you a feel for the kind of response the federal government and its partners has brought to bear, right now about 10,000 federal and National Guard troops activated in 4 states, 40,000 line workers ready to do electrical restoration, 1,250 tractor-trailer loads of food and water from FEMA are pre-positioned. So really a true partnership, and you can't do it without great partners like the state of Georgia. So FEMA and the federal interagency stand ready to support local, state, and tribal governments as they respond to Dorian, and we'd be happy to take some questions.
I'm going to go just make a few remarks real quick, and then we'll do questions if that's all right. Again, I just want to thank Pete and his team for being here on the ground with us and for the great collaboration that we've had from the federal level with the state level, and we're doing the same thing at the county level. I wanted to go over real quickly who we got with us today. Obviously, the First Lady, Marty Kemp. We have Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, Attorney General Chris Carr, our Agriculture Commissioner Gary Black, GEMA Director Homer Bryson, our State Meteorologist Will Langston, Commissioner Mark Williams, Department of Natural Resources, Georgia Department of Transportation Commissioner Russell McMurray, Georgia Department of Defense Adjutant General Tom Carden, Insurance and Fire Safety Commissioner General John King, and Department of Public Safety Commissioner Colonel Mark McDonough. In addition to all the GEMA officials deployed along the coast to provide assistance, we also have regional field reps from the governor's office on the ground as well. They are there to support GEMA and the locals that are on the ground, giving us feedback as the storm continues to roll into Georgia. As you all know, the National Weather Service latest projections show that Hurricane Dorian nudged slightly west with significant rain bands and strong winds moving into our coastal counties. We're seeing that right now. Bryan, Camden, Chatham, Glenn, Liberty, and McIntosh counties remained under a tropical storm warning as well as a storm surge warning. Brantley and East Charlton County, as well as Wayne County, are now under tropical storm warnings based on the new projections that we have this morning. We are getting reports of downed trees already in Glenn and Wayne County, which obviously that can be dangerous if you're still in your home with a tree falling on your home, knocking down power lines. So we urge citizens to be on the lookout or be cognizant of that. Serious concerns remain that we will see damaging and life-threatening surf with a coastal surge of 3 to 5 feet. We expect a high tide between now and 3 p.m., which could significantly worsen flooding. We expect another high tide shortly after midnight, where again we can see a strengthened storm surge and more flooding, depending on where the storm is at that point. These tides are prime opportunities not only for flooding, but serious ground level flooding, which we will continue to monitor early into Thursday morning. Wanted to speak a little bit about traffic. Based on current traffic flow, right about noon, the Georgia Department of Transportation, in conjunction with the Department of Public Safety and the State Patrol, reversed Contra flow on I-16 in line with the executive order that I signed just a few hours ago, or a short time ago. This reversal will allow emergency management officials to prepare for transport of critical life-sustaining resources. To be clear, 6 coastal counties east of I-95 remain under mandatory evacuation orders. If you have not gotten out, if you have time, you should do so now. Evacuees will not be allowed to return home until the storm has passed and local officials authorize their return. We have found that this local control is the quickest way to get folks back to their home, and we will be doing that as soon as possible. Very early this morning, I issued another executive order expanding the state of emergency declaration to 9 additional counties because of the tropical storm issues that we have. Currently, we now have 21 counties that are under the state of the emergency, and we have those if anyone needs them. I've also authorized the Georgia Department of Defense Adjutant General Tom Carden to activate up to 2,000 National Guardsmen should GEMA request their assistance. And before I turn it over to GEMA Director Homer Bryson for a quick update, I want you to know that after this briefing, several of the state officials that are standing behind me are available for one-on-one interviews if you have follow-up questions that we can't answer for you here. Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan has been working closely with his counterparts in Florida, South Carolina, and other states to coordinate our response and see what our friends and neighbors may need, as well as what our needs are. Attorney General Chris Carr can explain ongoing enforcement efforts to stop price gouging, and he's also been collaborating with Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to combat charity scams for those that want to help after the storm moves through, which sadly is a very common occurrence in today's world in the wake of a natural disaster. So we urge Georgians to be on the lookout for that. Agriculture Commissioner Gary Black has been working tirelessly to ensure adequate fuel supplies in the coastal region, also dealing with animal safety, and certainly he will be dealing with food safety issues post-storm depending on the power issues down on the coast. As you've heard in other briefings, Insurance and Fire Safety Commissioner John King has been working with his team to establish claim villages to help Georgians file with their insurance company after the storm. And Colonel McDonough, State Patrol, can provide information on deployment of Georgia State Patrol to protect the public, offer direct assistance, and certainly help in coordination with first responders and local law enforcement needs. And Marty would be mad at me if I didn't remind you that everyone affected by this storm that needs it, there are several resources there for families who have pets that need to evacuate or still need to do that, including our Georgia State Parks, which Georgia Department of Natural Resources Commissioner Mark Williams oversees, where you're allowed to bring your pet to stay with you at any location free of charge until the storm passes. Commissioner Mark Williams and Director Chuck Williams of the Georgia Forestry Commission have chainsaw strike teams that are staged in affected areas or very close to them already. They'll be ready to move as soon as it's safe for them to do so. And also they'll be helping with supply delivery. I think that gives you everything that I have. I'm going to turn it over to Director Bryson to give you a few remarks, and then he'll bring up Will Langston, and we'll hear from a few others. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Our primary function and responsibility is to support the local governments in our joint concerns for the safety of our citizens. And I'm proud to say that we have a great relationship here in our state between state government and local government, and that extends to our federal partners also. Currently, we've received over 150 requests for local governments for assistance. We've consolidated those requests into 109 separate missions. We have already completed 64 of those missions, and we're in the process of fulfilling the needs of the remaining ones. As far as we have a medical transportation group that has facilitated the transport of over 600 people of our vulnerable population from the coastal area. Sheltering, we have 25 shelters open, not counting the opportunities that the governor mentioned with DNR. Currently in those shelters, we have over 5,600 people in them, but we have capacity to hold at least that number and the ability to flex up for more if it becomes necessary. And with the theme with the First Lady, with animal shelters, they're reporting that we're housing 93 dogs, 37 cats, and 300 horses. The governor mentioned his authorization to the National Guard. We've enlisted their help with one of their transportation logistics groups. They're moving emergency response supplies towards the coast. We've spun up the State Defense Force. They're managing and working with us to plan for the operation of points of distributions, or pods as they're called, if that becomes necessary. We have 12 large generators en route to the state. They'll be here tomorrow if they're needed. And we've activated some intrastate mutual aid agreements with local governments for additional generators also. And I think it's important to share with everyone that relationship, and the counties that are working that for us are Wilkes, White, Ben Hill, Ware, Monroe, Dawson, and Jenkins County. And with that, I'll turn it over to our state meteorologist.
Thank you, sir. As the governor mentioned, he outlined the forecast very well. The forecast has remained consistent over the last few days. Right now, the hurricane is still a powerful Category 2 hurricane. It is just off the coast of Florida, moving really parallel to the coast, up the Georgia coast. The impacts that he mentioned of 3 to 5 feet of storm surge, 40 to 60 mile per hour winds, and even some higher gusts along the immediate coastline, those effects are imminent. We've already seen some of those verified in Florida so far on coastal areas. So we expect those impacts to occur this afternoon, through this evening, and overnight into the morning before finally the storm moves away from us tomorrow around midday. We're expecting 3 to 6 inches of rainfall as well. Flash flooding is not a huge concern. Really the biggest impacts we're going to see is around the coast. Everyone needs to stay away from the beaches. That'll be the most dangerous area. We'll have some life-threatening storm surge along with the tide, and wave action on top of it could be several feet of water and pose a significant risk to anybody who's near the coast.
Commissioner McMurray, you want to give us a DOT update on contraflow?
Yes, sir, Governor. Just a little more information on contraflow. Actively right now, Georgia State Patrol is reversing the contraflow starting in Savannah, working their way west toward Dublin. GDOT crews are removing the barrels and barricades that are associated with that. And once that's removed, the State Patrol will actually process eastbound in advance of the traffic that may be behind that as it goes back toward Savannah. But to underscore what the governor said is this is for us to be able to respond post-tropical storm and hurricane events. This is not a welcome mat to say it's time to head back to the coast. So please heed that warning. There's still plenty of capacity in I-16 to evacuate now because there is still time to do so. So please heed that warning. As a few expectations as we move forward for re-entry as tropical storm winds pass for tomorrow. We have crews that are pre-positioned that will be in Waycross, Jessup, and Statesboro that will be ready to activate and reopen roadways as they may be blocked by down trees as they get ready for the re-entry. Please understand that that only happens after tropical storm force winds subside and it's safe to re-enter the roadways to get out there to do that work. A few other expectations for re-entry. We will focus first on the hurricane evacuation routes, sort of in reverse order. And that would be our mission is to clear to make sure that the road is passable only, not necessarily edge line to edge line, but passable only for emergency response vehicles and power line crews to access down power lines. That's our first priority. Secondly is a prioritization of inundation and potential flooding that happens. We have 11 bridge inspection teams that will work their way from south to north following the storm to inspect and make sure that bridge or roadways that have been flooded or inundated are safe for traffic to pass by. So please, again, be patient because we need to inspect these bridges to make sure they're safe should they be flooded or have significant inundation in and around them. Finally, safety first and foremost. As this storm passes and as we endure this storm, safety of our workers and all the emergency response people is first and foremost. So please be patient. Do not hit the roadways. As soon as you think it's clear, wait to hear from those local governments, your EMAs, and from GEMA to know when things are clear to be ready to respond back. So please keep that in mind, our workers' safety, so that they can do the job they need to do that makes it safe for you. Thank you.
All right, I want to again thank Russell, DOT, and also Colonel McDonough and the State Patrol. They have sped up the time on contraflow in the last couple of years. I think it's 60-70% quicker now, so they're doing great work now. Great work in regards to that. I'm going to turn it over to General Carden to talk about strategic deployment of resources. General.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. I'm Major General Tom Carden, your Adjutant General. We have currently, under the Governor's order and in discussion with Director Bryson, we've mobilized and deployed 1,300 soldiers and airmen of the Georgia National Guard. We've got another 700 soldiers and airmen on alert As the governor mentioned, we've pre-staged a number of strategic capabilities just outside of where we think the storm impact will be. That includes aviation, logistics, transportation, debris clearance teams, and a whole lot more. At the end of the day, our job is never to be late to need when Director Bryson calls us, and certainly appreciate all the coordination that's going on at the local, state, and the federal level. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, General. Again, let me thank Administrator Gaynor for being here in Georgia and for the great response we've had with FEMA, and we'll open it up for questions, really for anybody that's up here. Yes, ma'am.
For the people who said, you know what, I'm just going to ride it out, I'm just going to stay despite all the warnings, is there a window of opportunity where even they have to wait for assistance, or even assistance will be cut off until after this one passes?
Well, I think it'd be tough for me to answer that question, not being on the ground. It's going to depend on where you are on the coast. Homer may have more to add to that. Certainly people that are in Savannah right now still have time to move. The roadways are in great shape. We've heard that from the Colonel and from DOT. So, you know, if people want to move, they can. I would suggest that they do that. We're very worried, especially about the barrier islands getting cut off if we have these storm surges at the same time the hurricane's coming through, and when the high tides are. And if people, I've told folks over the last 2 days, you get cut off, you know, we can't get medical assistance to you. But at some point, I realize people are not going to move. If they're not going to do that, they need to be in a strong part of their house. If they have large trees in their yards, watch out for down power lines, and, you know, be ready because you potentially can lose power and water.
Governor, are you worried about mixed messages by opening 16 to eastbound traffic at the same time telling folks?
No, I'm not at all. As Russell mentioned, we're doing that now to make sure we can get emergency vehicles. The westbound traffic has been very light today, so even if we still have people leaving, they're not going to get in gridlock traffic. It's very easy for them to move. They can certainly speak to that. But what we want to do is, when this storm passes, we want to be able to get people moving, especially first responders, supplies and equipment in if needed, so we can have a just as fast response to the post-storm as you've seen pre-storm.
There were some reports that some of the causeways going to barrier islands have been cut off. St. Simon's, Jekyll, I think were listed as possible. Do you have any update on whether those islands are still accessible, and any message on, any update on?
I don't think that we have heard that yet. So we have not heard that. We were expecting that. You know, I know we're getting into the high tide, I guess, right now, aren't we, Will? So that's certainly an option as the storm continues to move, but that could move too. You know, that may move with the storm up the coast. That's what's been so hard to, as Pete mentioned earlier, this slow-moving storm has been very hard to predict. But it is moving faster now. I think it's up to 9 miles an hour, which is not a whole lot, but it's a whole lot more than when it was sitting over the Bahamas.
Governor, can you talk about the response from the local, state, and federal level leading up to today, and whether you think it's been too much too soon, or how the declarations and things have enabled all the partners to get things ready?
Well, I would hate to say it's been too much too soon. You know, we were talking in our briefing yesterday, and I would, you know, I'm sure Pete would probably agree with this. I don't, you know, having a storm that just sits in one place, barely moving for, you know, 24 or 50, you know, 15 to 24 hours or whatever it was, is really kind of unheard of. So we were working off of past models, and in this game, you do not want to be slow to the preparations or slow to the response. I think we've learned that before, and you know, as the guy that's making these decisions, I'm relying on this team that's battle tested. Unfortunately, they've been through a lot of these, and we're reacting in the way that we've seen best in the past. And look, I know that's frustrating for our people. They've been through way too much of this, but we got to hunker down and chop some wood and get through one more. And that's just the reality of what we're in. You know, we're lucky in some ways. When you look at the radar and you look at the storm surge and the map and how wide the storm has gotten, even as it slowed down, I mean, that thing's 15 miles from our coast. If it moved 15 miles, that's like driving, you know, across town from me in Athens. and we'd be hitting a direct hit right now, which is what South Carolina's facing. So, you know, if that was the case, people would be wondering why we didn't do more. All right.
Sorry, Governor. Do you have any estimates on either how many people are evacuated or how many people stayed back, either percentage or just number?
Well, I don't know if I could answer that, Homer. May could talk to that about the number of people we have in the shelters again. But I will say this, you know, we haven't seen the volume of people coming from Florida that we thought we would because of the way the storm turned down there. I think Floridians, when I talked to Governor DeSantis, he was saying that a lot of his folks are going west or south, you know, once the storm turned. So we didn't pick up a lot of that traffic, which I think has been great for us. It's been less for us to have to manage. It'll be interesting to see what we see this afternoon as the storm moves toward South Carolina, looking like they're gonna get hit a little bit. But we have all our facilities open. You know, we got a lot of shelters that are open. Red Cross. We got our state parks. A lot of these guys can talk to you about our resources. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Pete, thank you.
Yeah, I didn't say no. Yeah, I didn't say no.